Hey, it's Nick Capozzi. Welcome to Razzball Radio on the Fantasy Sports Network. We've got a big show today on Thursday for you. First, we're going to have Joe Lisi from GoForThe2.com. He's going to break down some of the big college football games happening this weekend. And then we're also going to be joined by Michael Rathburn. We're going to preview the Thursday night game as well as look at some great daily fantasy plays for this weekend. So without further ado, let's bring on, I don't know how we make it work here, but it seems we have nothing but handsome guests on at Razzball Radio. The lovely, the talented, the saturated with college football knowledge, Joseph Lisi of GoForThe2.com at GoForThe2 on Twitter. Joe, welcome to Razzball Radio, brother.
Thanks, Nick. You're loaded with compliments today. I couldn't think of a better way to spend my Thursday but to be with you talking about college football.
Well, you know what I love about it, Joe? Okay, because I came from Canada, so, listen, I don't want to insult the University of Toronto versus York University because it's not much of a matchup. But, this whole college football thing's really new to me, and I want to make sure that I understand it so that I can make sure that, when we're scouting players that are coming up, potentially could be useful for next year for fantasy, I got to be in the know. So let's kick it off. Talk to me about the Golden Domers, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish versus the Syracuse Orange. How do you see that game? Break it down, Joe.
Interesting matchup, Nick. Notre Dame came off, they're all coming off a bye week. 2 weeks ago, they had a lackluster effort, picking up a 30-14 victory over Purdue. But top 10 team here for Brian Kelly. They're coming out off of a bye week, very dominant defense, only giving up about 99 rushing yards per game and only giving up 10 points per game. So a solid defensive front seven by Notre Dame. When you look at the flip side, Syracuse has quarterback issues in quarterback Terrell Hunt. He's a very athletic quarterback, but not making very good decisions. Syracuse likes to run the football. They're averaging about 265 rushing yards per game, but they can't stretch defenses vertically, only averaging about 192 passing yards per game. You look at Notre Dame's quarterback, Everett Golson. He can run, he can pass. He's very accurate this year, and he's the difference. I think Notre Dame has a convincing victory on Saturday.
Okay, interesting. Is it just me, or does it seem like, it would be more appropriate if the Fighting Irish had a quarterback named like Danny O'Sullivan or, Seamus O'Toole or something, I don't know.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking.
Everett Golson's a very good quarterback, very good college quarterback, has a lot of athleticism and can make it on the next level.
All right, so let's head over to the West Coast. Stanford versus Washington, big Pac-12 game. Who's going to win that one, buddy?
It's a very interesting matchup. Stanford's won 4 of the last 5. Last year, Stanford picked up a 31-28 victory in Palo Alto, led by Ty Montgomery, their big play wide receiver and kickoff returner. He took the opening kickoff the distance to really set the tone for that ball game. But when you break this game down a little bit further, Washington has a very solid defensive front seven. They have 19 sacks through four ball games right now, Nick, led by Danny Shelton. He's the nose guard, very dominant player. Chris Peterson, the former Boise State head coach, is a big game head coach. I like Boise State in this matchup.
Boise State. Stanford, Washington, man. We're going all the way. It's even the wrong conference. Even I know that.
You got me, Nick. I like Washington in this matchup. Chris Peterson's a very solid head coach. They've had some lackluster efforts last week against Georgia State. They've dropped behind that ball game 14-0. They came from behind in the second half, dominated. I like Washington for what they have on the defensive side of the ball. They match up very well against Stanford, and I think they pull up the upset this week.
All right, so now we got Mizzou at South Carolina. To me, this matchup is really about Missouri barbecue versus South Carolina biscuits and gravy. But I'll let you give the college football spin on it.
Very interesting matchup when you talk about Missouri, because Missouri last year had this game in hand, 17-0 in Columbia, Missouri, that is.
Not Columbia, the country in South America.
Not Columbia, South Carolina.
Sure,
Columbia, Missouri, 2 Columbias. Missouri had that game in hand, 17-0 going into the fourth quarter, and dominated on both sides of the ball. Former South Carolina quarterback Connor Shaw came in of relief for Dylan Thompson, took over that ball game, led South Carolina on 17 fourth quarter points, and picked up the victory in overtime. When you look at Missouri last week, they got upset by Indiana, a shocking defeat at home, 31-27. They gave up over 400 yards of total offense. They now go on the road, but I like Missouri in this matchup because of their athleticism on defense. They match up very well against South Carolina, and when you look at South Carolina's defensive secondary, very, very inexperienced. They're giving up 36 points per game. I think that Matty Mark, the Missouri quarterback, could exploit them. I'm looking for the upset in Columbia, South Carolina this weekend.
All right, so this is why you have to go for the 2.com, because, listen, we're giving you a taste here on Razzball Radio of what Joe and his co-host Cody Allen do. But you want the in-depth analysis. I mean, I'm making biscuit and gravy jokes, which is good stuff. Don't get me wrong. But if you want the hardcore stuff, go for the 2.com. Real quick, I just need you to give me the winner on these last two, just for the sake of time, Joe. But Duke versus Miami. I thought Duke only played college basketball.
Well, they do, but they also play football. They have a good quarterback in Anthony Boone. They're undefeated, but I think Miami at home plays much better than they do on the road. Miami picks up a convincing victory over Duke because of their defense.
All right, and then finally Northwestern versus Penn State. Again, give me the winner in this one.
Northwestern strikes the upset. They've only won one game in Happy Valley. That was in 2004, but they have a solid quarterback in Trevor Siemian. I think they strike the upset over Christian Hackenberg and Penn State.
All right, you know what? I've actually started to sit down because now, I'm in Phoenix, so my neighbors come out. Everyone here, it's awesome. They open up their garages on Saturday. Everyone has TVs here in their garages. This is a new concept to me. Maybe because, there's snow around our garage 9 months of the year in Canada. But everyone here down the street, their garage doors are open. They're watching college football. They got their team colors on. I feel kind of naked, Joe, because I feel like I don't have a team,
Well,
like the University of Canada Moose or something.
Montreal Alouettes were always my team in CFL. They have a lot of former NFL players that went there. Robert Edwards, the former Georgia Bulldog, he's the only player in the NFL and in the CFL to rush for 1,000 yards.
All right, Joe, let me throw one last thing at you. You got about 20 seconds here. Jamison Winston, a lot of off-the-field stuff. But if he makes it to the NFL, which is going to be a question now, you got 15 seconds. What kind of NFL quarterback would he be? What kind of style would he play?
I think he's more of a pro-set quarterback. He makes a lot of plays, stretches defenses with his arm. He's not a Colin Kaepernick in any way, shape, or form, or Russell Wilson. He's a pure pocket passer.
Joe, we love you because you know what I love about you too? You're the only guy who stays the time. When I say you got 15 seconds, it's like clockwork. True professional. Joe Lisi, go for the 2.com. This is Razzball Radio, Fantasy Sports Network. We'll be back right after this with Michael Rathburn. Thanks for joining us, Joe. Welcome back, Razzball Radio, Fantasy Sports Network. I now have the privilege of sitting down and virtually chatting with Michael Rathburn, one of the brightest minds in fantasy. You need to follow him at FantasyRath, R-A-T-H. And Michael, of course, you also write for RotorWire and DFSN. Welcome to Razzball Radio.
Thanks, Nick. Great to be here. Nick and I met in Charlotte, where I live. We did the Razzball draft, and it was a great time. And just glad that I was able to come on and talk about the industry.
Well, so you actually heard one of the hits I did on SiriusXM Fantasy, Roto Experts in the Morning, of course, also on the Fantasy Sports Network. And you said, "Hey Nick, what do you guys do in Charlotte?" I said, "Well, we're still working on it." And you brought out the who's who of the fantasy industry. Who knew that Charlotte was this mecca? I mean, you had Jason Collette there, you had John Halpin, you had Jeff from Football Guys. It was an all-star cast. I'll be honest, I got into so many drafts this year. It was the only one I was sitting there thinking, I wish I had gotten into this draft.
No, it's good. Unfortunately, my team's not looking too good in that league because I went extremely unconventional, went running back ×4, the first 4 picks.
Yeah, because everyone in that draft was going wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver.
Right. So, I've got Monte Ball, Toby Gerhart, C.J. Spiller. Unfortunately, right now I'm sitting at 0-3, so it's not looking great. But, I didn't want to draft the same way in every single league. Most of the leagues this year, I did go a little bit more wide receiver heavy early on, so I just didn't want to do the same thing in every single draft.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, another thing I want to talk to you about, and we're going to talk about some things that we'll be watching in the Thursday night game, and also some great daily fantasy plays in the next couple segments. But you're working on a documentary called Living with Fantasy. Take me through that. What are you guys actually trying to feature and showcase with this documentary?
Well, the main premise is to track 5 players in the fantasy football industry that are playing for a so-called championship. We're partnering up with FFWC, Scout.com, FF Toolbox for the season-long side of it. We're filming Jeff Mans from SiriusXM, Fantasy Alarm. We're filming Thad Houston, who's a big-time daily fantasy sports player. We're also filming a few other season-long guys, along with Tommy G, who is a huge daily fantasy guy, was just on HBO last night, and is also affiliated with Scout. So we're following these guys throughout the season. And I should mention, we are following Pilar Lastra and Kimra Schechter. I think that's her last name. We just know her as Kimra. She's the most successful female fantasy football player in the industry as far on a high stakes level. So we're excited about having Kimra and Pilar as well. And we're tracking these guys, throughout the season. We're going to tell the story of their journey of playing for high stakes fantasy football. And then also we've got a boatload of interviews for people in the industry, whether it's on the daily fantasy side or it's on the season long fantasy side. Just a ton of people in the industry that we're going to just basically try to tell the story of what's going on in the industry right now, and track these 5 players throughout the year. And what we're hoping for is that one of them ends up winning some big cash at the end of the season. Hopefully it's for $1 million.
All right, so after this documentary wins like Sundance and Cannes and all these film festivals, if you want to do, a follow-up movie about a guy who drives around and does 32 fantasy football drafts, 32 straight days, we can talk about that, because I may know someone.
Yeah, I know. I think, I'm hoping that, maybe Tribeca or somebody will pick it up. Hopefully we're shooting high. But I think that the timing on this documentary is huge. I mean, we're seeing mainstream media cover the industry right now, whether it's ESPN, HBO. I've been a part of some stuff with New York Times, USA Today. So the industry is getting a lot of media attention, and I think this documentary is coming at the perfect time. So I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good. And let us know when the first screening is, because you never know. Maybe I can load up the truck and we'll come cover it. You never know, Michael. I might just show up.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past you. You seem like the kind of guy that would do that.
All right, let's talk about the Thursday night game, Washington and the Giants. A couple players that I want to get your take on, because now we're, it's no longer a small sample size. It's kind of small to medium-sized sample size. All right, I'm making up words here. Not very well, apparently. But let's talk about Rashard Jennings, because this guy going into the season was a guy that I wasn't necessarily believing in. I don't have him, I think, anywhere. And right now he's a top 5 back. Do you think there's any chance that he winds up a top 5 back the rest of the season just because of the volume he's going to get?
I mean, that's lofty, to predict a guy to go top 5. I mean, now we're seeing a lot of turnover at the running back position, especially with injuries and with suspensions right now. But, saying top 5, I think is pretty lofty. I think he's got an outside shot at being a top 12 if he stays healthy. Look, the Giants' game plan is going to have to be to make sure that Eli Manning doesn't lose games.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that means you need to take the ball out of his hands and you need to put it in Jennings' hands. Now, I think that presents a little bit of a problem this week, because the Redskins' running defense has been really stout so far this year. I know it's been 3 games, but look what they did with McCoy last week. They really held these 3 teams in check. I think the average is like 2.8 yards a carry. So the game plan for the Washington Redskins defense right now is to stop Jennings and make Eli Manning beat them. Now, the thing is,
if they can stop Rashard Jennings.
Well, I mean, they've been able to stop everybody so far. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a guarantee. I will say, the Carolina Panthers had stopped everybody until Sunday night.
Right.
Le'Veon Bell, you ran nuts. So I think Jennings can still have a decent game. I don't think he's going to blow up like he did last week, but that's going to be critical early on as the run game of the Giants against this Redskins defense.
All right, we got about 45 seconds here. I want to talk to you about Kirk Cousins, because, I'm starting to think there's a chance that he's this year's Nick Foles. Is that crazy?
No, it's not. I mean, he's got Deshaun Jackson, who Foles ironically had last year. He's got Pierre Garçon. He's got Jordan Reed when healthy, but he's also got Niles Paul, who looks like a relatively good tight end, and he's also got Andre Roberts as a 3rd wide receiver, plus Alfred Morris. I think there's a lot of things in place for Kirk Cousins to succeed. I actually had a bold prediction that he would outpoint Griffin this year because I felt like either Griffin would get rid of the job due to poor performance or injury. So I think Kirk Cousins does have an outside shot to be a top 12 quarterback.
All right, one more thing, too, before we go to break. Someone that I'll be watching in particular, I think there's a chance that Roy Halou has a sneaky 1,200-yard combined yardage season this year with a few touchdowns. I think because there is going to be that offense looks really good. A lot of mouths to feed, but I think Roy Halou sneakily will get some yards there. We'll talk more about that. We're going to do some daily fantasy sports, but just before we do, a little shout out to the Rec Room, our sports bar of the day, Thursday Night Football in San Francisco. Head on down, see them on California Avenue. Go see Todd. Tell him Nick sent you. He'll buy you a shot of Fernet, maybe. Razzball Radio, Fantasy Sports Network. We'll be right back. Come back. I was going to say Fantasy Sports Network, but that's what this is. But the show's called Razzball Radio. I'm Nick Capozzi. He's Michael Rathburn at Fantasy Rath, one of the brightest minds in fantasy. Seriously, you need to follow this guy's Twitter feed. I kid you not. Michael, we're going to talk a little daily fantasy right now. Let's start at quarterback. The most expensive guy this week at DraftKings.com is Drew Brees at $9,300. Stafford at the Jets for $8,000 is a play I like, but here's the one I really like this week. And we talked at the break. You and I might disagree. Big Ben, Roethlisberger, $6,900 versus Tampa Bay. That seems like a good value play to me. But you think they're going to run all over the Buccaneers?
Yeah, I do. I mean, considering what the Steelers were able to do to the Panthers, I don't envision why they would want to come back here and try to throw the ball all over the field. I think that this is a home game. They're a heavy favorite. Now, it's a non-conference home game. There's no reason for Tomlin to go crazy here. They're all banged up on defense. So I think what they're going to try to do is play ball control with Tampa Bay and run it down their throat. I think you'll see a heavy dosage of Le'Veon Bell and LeGarrette Blount in this game. I think Antonio Brown will get his targets, but I don't think Big Ben is going to throw the ball more than 20 times in this game. And I just think that would limit his upside. I'm sure he's got a nice floor. He probably won't turn the ball over, but I don't see them throwing the ball in this game. So that's why I probably wouldn't be on him.
Okay, that's a fair argument. In terms of running backs, DeMarco Murray, the high price tag, $8,300 versus the Saints. Jennings, we just talked about. Rashad, you think Washington's going to keep him in check, $6,500. Here's a couple that I do like this week. One is Lamar Miller, $6,200. He's going up against Oakland, second worst rushing defense in the NFL. I also like Kiri Robinson, $4,800 versus Dallas, because I think they're going to move the ball very well against Dallas. He might get some punches into the end zone. And last but not least, I like Bishop Sankey at $4,100 at Indianapolis. And the reason for that is I think garbage time. I think Indy's going to get up on Tennessee quick, and I think there's just going to be opportunity, maybe sneak in a late touchdown. Bishop Sankey, half the price of DeMarco Murray. Anyone out of that group you like particularly this week?
Well, I like Murray at home. He's been proven. They've gone to him 3 straight games. Even though with the fumbles, they've still gone to him. They're not throwing the ball at this point. And I think if you want to beat New Orleans, you don't want to get into a shootout.
Yep.
And I think that, a lot of people, it's a very short memory league in the NFL. There's 17 weeks. Everybody always remembers what you did last week, but they forget what you did the week before and the week before that. Dallas played pretty good on defense the first 2 weeks of the season. They got a little bit exposed last week, in the Rams, but a lot of times it's how the tempo and the flow of the game goes. New Orleans, on the other hand, is not a very good road team, and people are already forgetting about that. They struggled. They lost at Cleveland, and they should have lost at Atlanta. They should be 1-2.
Yeah.
They didn't blow out the Vikings last week at home, which was everybody was surprised. They only put up 20 points. I think they were flat for that game. I'm not sure they're going to be up for this game. I think they'll be up more than they were last week. But I think this is a dangerous spot, and I think Murray's going to have a big game.
Okay, no, that's interesting. Typically, when you play, at what position are you comfortable, sinking in a lot of cash? As a quarterback, wide receiver? Like, would you rather have a Calvin Johnson or DeMarco Murray?
Well, it's always price dependent and matchup dependent, and also we got to throw in contest dependent when you're playing daily fantasy. And there's 2 types of contests that we talk about. It's cash games, which is when you're playing one-on-one heads up, where there's a 50% chance of winning, or a 50-50 double up, which you're playing against several other people and half the field wins. Those types of contests, you want to spend a little bit more on your quarterback because those are more stable. Those productions at the, you want a top 5 quarterback. You want to spend, I think there's always value at running back, especially with injuries and things like that. So you can always find value at running back. I then try to find stud wide receivers that are consistent guys. Antonio Brown, Julian Edelman. Those are two guys. When you got a guy like Calvin, yeah, you love to pay up, but I don't like paying up for Calvin on the road, so that's something that I definitely look at. I rarely pay for tight end unless I'm going Manning, Thomas, or Breeze, Graham, or I'm pairing guys up. That's when I'll pay up. Otherwise, I'll look for guys like Zach Ertz.
Ertz, of course, up against San Francisco this week, so it's a bit of a tougher matchup for Ertz against the Niners.
Yeah, well, I mean, that game, I do think that there's going to be some points scored in that game. San Francisco's defense is not what it used to be, and they're also short 2 tight ends, and they ran a lot of 5 wide receiver sets against Arizona last week. So I do think, I think the total is 53. So I think that Niner game is going to be up and down. The Eagles don't, no one slows the Eagles down, and they don't slow anybody down. So they're 30 on each side.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's going to be a fun game to watch. It actually might be the best game on the docket, at least on Sunday.
That's a desperation game for the Niners right now. That's a must-win game for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to throw out 3 receivers I like this week based on value, and I'll tell you why. Steve Smith versus the Panthers, $5,600. Because Steve Smith, he gets up for every game, but if it's possible to get more up for a game, it's going to be against his former team.
It wouldn't shock me that he signed with Baltimore knowing that he was going to play against Carolina. He's just that kind of guy. I live here in Charlotte, and he's jacked up for this game. Trust me, they're going to be coming for him.
Yeah, I could see 150 yards and 2 touchdowns even against that defense. I also like DeAndre Hopkins, $4,800 versus Buffalo, only because I think Hopkins has arrived. I think regardless of who's throwing the ball, and I think Buffalo, as good as the defense has been, I think Hopkins is still going to be the guy who gets the opportunity there. And last but not least, I'll throw one more at you. I also like Greg Jennings, $4,500 versus Atlanta, because here's the thing. Atlanta is not a good road team. So either they're going to be out of it and Minnesota will keep the game competitive, or Atlanta will finally say, hey, look, Minnesota hasn't played well. We're going to blow this out of the water. And Jennings, again, garbage time, which is something you're looking for occasionally in DFS. I like that at $4,500. What do you think?
I like the angle on the Jennings play. I hadn't thought about it. I've taken a look at Cordell Patterson a little bit. You're just hoping they get him back in the offense, but it hasn't happened. With Bridgewater there, I think he's going to want to rely on go with a reliable guy, and I think Jennings would be that guy. Kyle Rudolph is out, obviously the AP situation, so I agree with the Jennings play. I actually think Minnesota is going to pull the upset in this game. I don't like Atlanta on the road. I don't think they should be favored, and I do think that the Vikings are going to kind of circle the wagons a little bit at home. They know now that Castle's done for the year. They have to go with Bridgewater, and Bridgewater is a very mature guy for a rookie. Is he going to make mistakes? He is, but I think he's going to be able to run the ball a little bit here. Wouldn't shock me if Bridgewater gets a rushing touchdown. He's actually my number 1 sleeper at the quarterback position this week. If you're playing in large field qualifiers, I'd love him on DraftKings.
Right.
I think he's 5,600.
Michael, I hate to cut you off. The only problem with having you on the show is I don't have enough time for all your insight. This is Razzball Radio, Fantasy Sports, and we're back tomorrow on Friday with Sky. We'll talk about what we're looking at over the weekend as well as start sits. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
You got it. Thank you.